So, there's quite a few things that led to the Civil War starting. And I think it's important for us to kind of see the progression in history that leads up to it. And I'll keep it as short and sweet as possible. But in order for things to make sense, the big why has to be asked at the beginning. Why the Civil War? Well, it does boil down to slavery, but I think the better question is there'd always been slavery. So why in 1861 did it boil down to slavery? Like, what was the pressures that led up to that? So I got lots of maps here to help us out. Interesting, I kind of mentioned kind of connected events here. We've got the American Revolution. We've got our 13 colonies. I circled Florida on accident. It wasn't one of the 13 colonies. Maybe that's better. Yay, there they are, 13, happy. Now, after the American Revolution, they did end up getting a fair amount of land that England was like, fine, we give up. We don't want any of that. Of that west of the Appalachians, the one that King George said you can't settle there. Once the colonies had broken away, they sort of settled on an agreement at the Treaty of Paris of like it makes more sense for the colonies to have it. We've seen other images where the different states made different claims on this, and so that was part of why they needed a United States, is so that instead of these different colonies, which sort of thought of themselves as countries, making claim to stuff, they could say like, nope, nobody gets it. That's actually a different state. This is its own state. This is its own state, etc. All right. After the American Revolution, maybe about 15 years, some of the people involved in the American Revolution, Marquis de Lafayette comes to mind, went back home to France, and it was followed by the French Revolution. The French Revolution was like a nasty, ugly version of the American Revolution. It was incredibly bloody and disorganized and awful. At the end of it, they didn't settle on this neat constitution. Again, part of what makes the U.S. Constitution so remarkable was its effectiveness. And instead, it was a lot of like bickering and disagreeing and arguing and got ugly, which set the stage for someone has to take charge. And that person was a guy by the name of Napoleon. And I know at this point you're like, whoa, we're way over to Napoleon? What does this have to do with the Civil War? My goodness. So with the king gone in France, and no democracy or Congress stepping up to the plate to lead, the military took over. This is unfortunately a thing that often happens in revolutions. The people with the guns take charge. In 1800, that was Napoleon. So he takes charge of France and is not content with just ruling and being emperor of France. He goes about just really crushing most of Europe, just kicking butt and taking names all over the place. And we have discussed routinely throughout history, in order to wage war, especially on the huge scale that Napoleon did, you need money. Wars cost money. Wars are about taxes. And so Napoleon really wanted to conquer Europe, but France had all of this extra land claimed left over from the French and Indian Wars. And we found this new country over here, and so he agreed to sell it at a pretty bargain price. And so the third president, Thomas Jefferson, at the time, Napoleon came to him and was like, hey, you guys need some land. I need some cash. TJ was like, oh my gosh, that's a steal. Like, I'll totally take you up on that bargain. We're good to go. And so Thomas Jefferson went about buying the Louisiana Purchase. And that is the yellow marked area that Napoleon sold. Napoleon sold almost all of France's claim in North America at the time in an effort to take over Europe. By the by, he did not succeed. But the Purchase left the U.S. in charge of huge tracts of land. And how we were going to acquire and assimilate and make that a part of the United States is what leads directly to the American Civil War. Why would more of something lead to conflict? Well, it boils down to this. Part of what made the Constitution work is this idea of one for one. For every one state they had down here, they made sure there was a corresponding state in the north. So there's a second state in the south, they went up and made sure there was a matching state in the north. So for every slave-holding state, there was a free state that would balance it out, specifically in the Senate. And the slave-owning states felt like as long as we make sure we're balanced in the Senate, nothing too terrible. That was one of the checks and balances. They said that as long as we own half of or run half of the Senate, we'll make sure that this forever stays balanced. All right. It doesn't really matter the size of the states because in the Senate, everyone gets a vote. So the question is, once we got all this new land, how do we make sure that half of it stays down here and then an equal half is divided up here because the northern parts were obviously much larger? Okay, well, that's just a matter of math. But then we see kind of Missouri sort of poking out there at the top. Because what ended up happening is an effort to do that, they ended up making these slave-holding states, like Missouri, to balance out the Senate. But the reality was that there wasn't a ton of slaves needed over here. They weren't huge slave-holding areas. And so they sort of artificially tried to follow the rules of matching up one slaveholding with one free and didn't really honor what was actually going on out west. So they had to come up with a series of compromises. The one drawn here was the Compromise of 1820 that would sort of match up. And then at the end, there was kind of the straw that broke the camel's back, which we'll see on the next map, which said, you know what, we can't have slave-owning states down here. And that threw off the balance. Once the balance was lost, the South said, we got to go. All right. So in order for the Civil War unit to make sense, we're going to need a better sense of where the states are on the map. At the very least, we need to know which way is north and which way is south. And this is a good map to kind of help illustrate this. You should have your own copy of this. You could print one out or do it digitally. Printing would allow you to have a map for our future references to what's going on as we talk about different states around the country. But if you just want to do it in Notability digitally, that's okay too. It will probably involve you going back and forth between this video and that map to color things in as you go, but it shouldn't be too tedious. Now, the first step is to kind of fill in my key up here at the top. I'm going to use a highlighter for most of my coloring because it'll allow me to see what's underneath the image while I do it. If you're doing a paper copy, using colored pencils instead of marker might be the same way. Although if you're a really careful markerer, you could do it that way too. But if you're doing it digitally, highlighter is the way to go. So the slaveholding states, the Confederate states, are gray. Ooh, I'm not even sure we can see my gray. It's so light. And the Union states are blue. This is typically how we denote the North versus the South. The North often wore these navy blue uniforms and are often referred to as the blue. And then gray is associated with the Confederacy or the South. So those two colors, even though they seem like a weird thing to be coloring in this map with, it's a reference to their uniforms and sort of the colors we associate them in history. And then there's red, and red are the territories. The last part of our map is actually using the pencil, and that's to show which states owned slaves. I'm not going to do that in red, though. I'm going to use this black one. So I have sort of this cross-hatched, or this diagonal lines, excuse me, not cross-hatched. Diagonal lines show which are the slave-holding states. All right. I'm actually going to put a pause on section 2 here. I'm going to pause on that and skip ahead to number 3. So we'll come back to section 2. But for right now, I want to draw and get a sense of where is this Confederacy and where is the North, the Union. The Confederacy, if you look, they've got a little abbreviations, and I'm going to try and color them in and read what the abbreviations are as I cross them off. So VA is Virginia. Again, my gray is especially light, so I apologize for that. But what happens if I just color it in black? Oh, there we go. I have a darker gray. VA is Virginia. NC is North Carolina. I am not being super careful. You be as detailed as you want. SC is South Carolina. TN is Tennessee. Notice how, of course, they're all next to one another. GA is Georgia. That fills out our original colonies. FL is Florida, which became a state after we took it from Spain. AL is Alabama. This is now called the Deep South. At that point, there wasn't a ton of farming going on there, but what was there was all heavily plantation-based and slaveholding. MS is Mississippi, also in the Deep South. And then we had some relative newcomers, Arkansas AR. LA is Louisiana, and TX is Texas. And those were relatively new as part of the Louisiana Purchase, and Texas was actually its own country for a little while. How we acquired that is its own peculiar historical reference. All right, and then I switch over to my blue highlighter. They kind of move across in order, but it's worth us reading them just, again, to make sure we understand what states are states. So with blue, I've got ME, which is Maine, which was Massachusetts at one point, but became its own state. NH is New Hampshire. VT was part of New York and eventually became Vermont. MA is Massachusetts. RI is Rhode Island. It's already sort of colored. CT is Connecticut, kind of cramming it in there. NY is New York. Not a ton of surprises here, as most of these are the original colonies. NJ, New Jersey. PA, Philadelphia. Nope, Pennsylvania. Philadelphia is a city there. DE is Delaware, so tiny. MD is Maryland. It's kind of this weird jigsaw-shaped colored one. That was a part of the South and a very heavy slave-owning area, but did not choose to secede, so it stayed in the Union. Interesting. West Virginia was a part of Virginia and now became West Virginia, WV. OH is Ohio. KY is Kentucky. IN is Indiana. MI is Michigan, which actually has two parts, the lower peninsula, and then this up here is the upper peninsula. IL is Illinois. You do not pronounce the S. MO is Missouri. IA is Iowa. MN is Minnesota. Somehow I skipped Wisconsin. Who knew? That one's in there too, you know. KS is Kansas. OR is Oregon. And then the real chink, CA, California. Now, California is about as south and sunny as you could ask for a beautiful state to be. But California had no business being a slave-owning state and refused to be. So there was sort of a line that demarcated, like, hey, everything below this is going to be a slave-owning state, and everything above it was not. And that was the plan until California. California in 1848 found a tremendous amount of gold, which led to a bunch of people moving to California in 1849. It's almost like the year 49 is significant to the people of California. The ones that went sometimes were referred to as 49ers. Yes, that is the California gold rush. It led to a ton of people moving out there, hence why it deserved to be a state, even though it's not connected to the rest of the states. But very, very few farmers and plantations, almost none, which made the idea of it being a slave-owning state frankly ridiculous, because what would the purpose of a slave-owning state without slaves be? So California really threw a wrench in that plan of saying everyone above said line is going to be free, and everyone below it, or south of it, excuse me, is going to be a slave. And so that made everybody start rethinking this fairness of two senators from the north, two senators from the south. States would get added in pairs that way, and California really threw that off. The last part down here is highlighting these red areas: Dakota, which would become the Dakotas, and Montana much later, Nebraska, New Mexico, which would become New Mexico and Arizona at some point. The Indian Territory, which would eventually become Oklahoma, but interestingly one of the last states, as that was where they sent all the Native Americans to, until they needed it, and then they took it and they also became a state. Colorado is pretty much Colorado. Utah Territory, we have our own history of being settled by the Mormon pioneers and only much later joining the United States. Nevada was Nevada. And the Washington Territory, you can see Washington and Idaho were made up here. Territories are areas that are owned by the country of the United States, but were not states themselves. We still have some, to this day, areas that are owned by the U.S. but are not states, and thus do not have voting rights and things like that. Puerto Rico is one of them. Guam is one of them. American Samoa. are all areas that are still territories to this day. We own them and they follow our laws, but don't get a chance to actually vote and things. Doesn't sound fair? You tell it to the people in Puerto Rico. Okay. So this final point is, if I go back up to number 2 and really revisit and finish this, what we start to notice is as I fill these in, yeah, there are, oh, I'm doing some diagonal lines. Yours are probably much neater than mine. There are a fair number of blue areas that still own slaves. We would expect the South, of course, to be this huge slave owning place. Why would you be a part of the Confederacy if keeping your slaves was not your priority? So, of course, all of this gray area remains a part of the Confederacy and a slave owning space. But we do end up with Missouri, Kentucky, West Virginia, and Maryland and Delaware, excuse me. They ended up being slave owning areas, but did not actually join the Confederacy. And they're called the border states because they made the border between these two nations, for lack of a better term. They were briefly their own nation. And interestingly, they were areas that philosophically disagreed with the North and valued their slaves, and yet didn't disagree strongly enough that they actually seceded and left. And that raised problems of their own as they went. Notice that we talked about West Virginia up until this time was one big place, and the Civil War, if you read down at the bottom, in the very middle of the Civil War, 1863, is when West Virginia broke apart. And decided, you know what, we are actually a few counties that want to stay a part of the Union. And Virginia, you do not, so we're going to be our own state now. We're going to be the state to the state. But those border states are where a majority of the fighting took place, but also intellectually the conflict was, because they sort of agreed with both sides and they sort of disagreed with both sides. But slaveholding and the South don't actually go hand in hand. There were some of each. All right. So we should have sort of a finished map, a finished sense of where this war is being fought. My final point here will be, I mean, I hope that you can look at it and see the Union is much larger, and it even has more people in it. So just looking at states can be a little deceiving because there weren't a ton of people in Texas at this point in time, or in Arkansas, or in Oregon, or California for that matter. However, even the people and the land area, the number of states, everything favored the North. But the South felt, for freedom's sake, their own freedoms, not the slaves' freedoms, they needed to secede. An interesting part that stems out of this, that is the final point of this map, is the capital. The capital of the United States remained Washington, D.C., which is right here, this yellow spot. It is across the river from Virginia. So the enemy, the Confederacy capital, was literally a mile of water separating them. And so that is a big part of what led to the assumption that this would be a short war. Because even though they never captured Washington, it seemed like a very straightforward thing. The same thing happened with the South. Despite owning all of this as part of their territory, the leader of the South was Virginia, and so the Virginian capital became the country capital of the Confederacy, and that was in Richmond, which was, about 50 or 60 miles away from Washington, D.C. And so despite all of this land area being occupied by these two different now countries, their capitals were not literally, but a few days' walk apart from one another. And that led to a lot of the war feeling like we're on the verge of winning because we're so close to their capital. Once we take that, they will give in. And so it was not close. It was a very long, very bloody 4 years. But looking at the maps here, part of that capital placement is what led that belief to propagate, that we're almost there. All right. Keep this, treasure it, frame it, stick it on your fridge, love it forever.